Maybe each of us has one person in life who remains in our memory like a warm ray of light. Not because they were our partner, not because there was some great love, but simply because they existed, and that was enough. For me, that person was her. We met back in childhood. We went to school together, lived in the same town, walked the same streets. I can't say we were inseparable, more like acquaintances who always treated each other kindly. We weren't in love, we didn't date. What we had was something else, something light, sincere, without expectations. I remember how she laughed at those school celebrations. She had such an open, pure laugh that you couldn't help but smile along. She was always a bit apart, yet somehow in the very center of it all. I don't know how to explain it. She had a way of being present, even in silence. We grew up, graduated school, went to different universities. Life moved on. She followed her own path, and I followed mine. I got married. My wife and I had children. We lived an ordinary life in our hometown, where everything felt painfully familiar. Sometimes I'd see her at the store, in a cafe, or just on the street. Always polite, reserved, with the same smile. We'd exchange a few words. How are you? How are the kids? And part ways like acquaintances from the past. I didn't think of her as someone important then. Everything felt too ordinary. But then, life began to change. My wife and I started losing our connection. Not all at once. It wasn't like thunder on a clear day. It was more like a slow fading. First, the conversations grew shorter. Then the hugs disappeared. Then the glances. Each of us lived our own life, under the same roof. Around that time, I decided to go abroad. It wasn't an escape. I truly wanted to earn money, to buy a house, to give my family more. I planned to go just for a year or two, but life had other plans. The job dragged on. My family stayed in Ukraine, and I stayed there. And it wasn't so easy to come back. Eventually, the marriage completely fell apart. We divorced. There were no fights or scandals, just an emptiness that couldn't be filled anymore. I got used to my new life. Monotonous, work-focused, friends in messages, family at a distance, children through texts and short calls. It was lonely, but I had already learned not to complain. And then, one evening, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea. It was late, and the world outside the window felt completely foreign. I was scrolling through my contact list just to keep my hands busy, and I came across her name. I don't know why then, why exactly at that moment. I decided to write. Maybe I just wanted to feel something familiar, even for a moment. Hi, how are you? That was it. No hidden intentions, no plan. She replied a few hours later, just as simply, "Hi, I'm doing well. And you?" And the conversation began. From that evening on, we started talking. At first, rarely. Then, every day. Our messages were warm, unexpectedly genuine. They pulled things out of me I hadn't said in years. We talked about work, about daily life, about memories, sometimes even about things we had never told anyone else before. I learned she had divorced too, long ago, peacefully, without drama. It just happened. And again, that word, just. She had always been that way. Not loud, not pushy, but someone who touched you deeply. We started having video calls. Her voice was exactly how I remembered it, and her eyes, deeper, wiser. There was silence in them, the kind you want to listen to. We could sit in silence on those calls, and it never felt awkward. We could laugh, remembering our childhood. We could simply exist. One day I asked, "Do you remember our childhood? Those walks, those evenings in the yard?" She smiled and said, "I remember. I always felt like you were someone I could trust, even when we hardly spoke." That touched me deeply, more than I expected. Time passed. We grew closer. I started noticing that I was thinking about her all day, that I was hearing her in voices, in phrases, in sounds, that she was the one I wanted to share everything with. And then I dared to say it. I think back in school, I didn't understand what was pulling me towards you. But now, I know. You're my place. She looked at me for a long time, silent. And then she whispered, "I feel it too. I do." This wasn't a story of passion, not a drama. This was something deeper, a warmth that had waited for years. Two souls that never lost each other, even though they had walked through life apart. We're still not together physically. She's home, I'm abroad, but we are together. In every word, in every glance, in every good night that echoes through the screen. Sometimes, love doesn't come when you look for it. It comes when you're ready to receive it. And it begins with something simple. "Hi, how are you?" They hadn't seen each other for a very long time. It felt like an eternity. Only their voices on the phone and messages in chat formed the bridge between two different worlds. He lived far away, in another country, in a foreign city, where everything was new and strange. She stayed at home, among familiar streets, but in her heart, a restless longing for their meeting was growing. They called each other whenever they had a free moment, sharing everyday stories and planning a future that seemed so unreachable. He asked her to come visit him, but she hesitated. Sometimes it felt like something held her back, doubts, fear, or simply the unknown. But one day, having overcome all uncertainties, she finally took the leap. She bought train tickets and prepared herself for a meeting that would change everything. He was preparing too. Living in a small room, he booked a hotel room and arranged a few excursions, wanting every moment to feel special. And then, the long-awaited day arrived. He stood on the platform, a little nervous, but with joyful eyes. The train pulled in, and his heart began to beat faster. As she stepped off the carriage, he saw her, almost unchanged, with that same charming smile and shining hair. Hi, he managed to say. "Hi," she replied. "I arrived safely, though I was a bit nervous. It was my first such long journey." He kissed her cheek, took her suitcase, gently hugged her by the waist, and they walked together toward the car. By the car door, he held a bouquet of roses, her favorite flowers. "I remembered," he said softly. "You've always loved roses." She smiled, and her eyes glowed warmer than ever. They arrived at the hotel in the evening, when the city had begun to fall asleep under the gentle hum of the wind and the soft yellow glow of streetlights. The room was cozy, nothing extra, but thoughtfully designed down to the smallest detail. A spacious bed, large windows overlooking the evening city, warm lamplight. She carefully placed her suitcase in a corner and approached the window. "It's beautiful here," she said, gazing at the distant lights. "And peaceful. I wanted you to feel good," he replied, standing beside her. That evening they talked for a long time. They sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, sipping tea from paper cups, laughing over childhood memories and school mischief. Time disappeared. It seemed to vanish completely when they were together. The next day, they walked the city like tourists and lovers at once. He showed her ancient streets, and she photographed everything as though for the first time. They visited a museum and took a boat tour where the wind tousled her hair, and he watched her with a smile, seeing in her something extraordinary. In the evening, returning to the hotel room, they talked again for hours. They lay on the bed, face to face, discussing their future, their fears and dreams. "You know," she said quietly, "I thought I would never be able to open up to someone again. But with you, everything feels so simple, as if I'm already home." He didn't reply with words. He just touched her cheek. And their first kiss happened. Without rush, without intensity, tender, quiet, as if all the evening light had gathered in that moment between them. They spent the night together, not like two strangers meeting on passion, but like two people who had spent years walking toward each other, without realizing that the end of the journey would be an embrace, where they no longer wanted to be anyone else. Their bodies were close, but even closer were their souls. They touched not just skin, but something deep, something hard to describe, and both felt truly good. In the morning, they woke up together. The room still smelled of coffee and roses. She lay wrapped in a blanket, and he watched her, thinking only of one thing: how hard it would be to let her go. The day of departure came too soon. They stood again on the platform. He held her hand and remained silent. She smiled, even though tears glistened in her eyes. She said, "Thank you for every single moment. I want this to be not the end, but the beginning. And I do too," she whispered back. "I'll come back. I promise." The train was coming. She hugged him, firmly, warmly, for a long time, then stepped on the train steps and looked back one last time. "Write me, okay? Every day, like before, and more." The train pulled away. He stood until she disappeared from his view. His heart clenched, but at the same time, it was calm, because now he knew for sure she exists, and between them, something real. Chapter 3, Under the Same Sky. One evening, when the voice on the phone had long become dearer than the silence around them, they were once again talking for hours. She was wrapped in a blanket with a cup of mint tea, and he, on the other side of the world, looked out at a city slowly falling asleep under the stars. Their conversation was warm and quiet about everyday things, but it is in such simple talks that new turns of fate are born. "You know, we've been invited to spend New Year's with some friends. They've been asking us for a while. The kids and I are going. I'm a bit nervous, but excited," she said, almost casually. "Another country?" he asked. His heart tightened, though he tried to sound calm. "Can I come too?" She paused for a moment, then smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I hadn't even thought of that. Of course, come." That country was in between theirs, like a bridge between the life they had known and the one that might become. He prepared for the trip with quiet resolve, gifts for her and the children, and not just clothes in his suitcase, but a dream he was finally ready to make real. He didn't need permission or certainty, only her yes. She prepared with a bit of anxiety, the kids, the suitcases, the thoughts, but behind it all, joy. Because during that magical time of year when everyone hopes for a miracle, her miracle already had a name and a heart. In the new country, everything felt different. The air, the smells, the light. But the children laughed, the friends greeted them with warm hugs, and the house they arrived at was cozy and welcoming. He flew in a few days before New Year's. Her heart beat faster with every hour. He met them at the bus station. She walked up to him. They embraced. Then she introduced him to her sons. He remembered the older one when he was just a toddler and had only seen the younger one in photos. They celebrated New Year's together, in a living room decorated by the children, filled with laughter, mulled wine, and the scent of cinnamon. At midnight, she looked at him, and he looked at her. In the crowd, among the fireworks and champagne, there were only the two of them. "You're here," she whispered, "and I'm staying." There was a tenderness in his eyes she hadn't felt in years, and she looked at him, not as a friend, but as someone who could become much more.